Hello and welcome to Fearless DIY Music. My name is Tristan Lass, and today I'm joined by my dear friend Kevin Gamble. He and I are going to be discussing a topic today. We're not going to do any intro. We're just going to jump right into the topic. And since we're both, middle-aged, old men, basically, not old men, but old enough, and we talk a lot about things that aren't necessarily of the moment. Particularly, we talk about gear, we talk about, production, and we talk about AI, and we talk about lots of different things. But I thought it would be really interesting to discuss, just really in brief, touching upon the music that our children are into. I have a 10-year-old son, and I have a 14-year-old daughter. And we're not going to deep dive into the artists or anything like that, but just to kind of get a thumbnail of what our kids are listening to, because I think that that's really important. I mean, music really resonates, I think, when you're coming of age, when you reach that moment where you're making that choice, where it's like, oh, this is what I choose to listen to. I'm not going to listen to what my dad listens to. I'm not going to listen to what my mom listens to. And that is why Kevin and I are sitting here now. We found music that we loved and we latched onto, and then we wanted to play instruments and do something similar or take it and move it somewhere else. So I thought it would be really interesting just to explore this topic in brief, just to kind of ground ourselves a little bit in what's happening right now. So I thought that we would alternate, and I'll start with my oldest and give her top three picks. Then you can do your oldest's top three picks, and then we'll do the youngers, and then just kind of wrap it up. So anyway, my daughter has become quite the music fan over the past few years. She actually has LPs because we do have a record player. So the artist that I know is number one on her list, she wrote all three down, but I know that this one's at the top for a reason, is Billie Eilish. Her first mega concert was last year. She saw the show with my wife and had an incredible time. It was a transformative experience for her. It was an empowering experience. Billie Eilish is, for a young woman to see her up on stage and, the openness and the, social progressivism of her message and just everything just resonates really strongly with my daughter. And she has 4 Billie Eilish LPs, so she has vinyl. She likes to listen to the vinyl, and Billie Eilish is really her touchstone. I think that and I like Billie Eilish myself. I didn't get it at first when it first came out years and years ago, but now that I hear it and kind of see it through my daughter's lens, the lyrics are really good, and she and her brother hand-stitch everything. I mean, it's not like they have outside producers. They use actual instruments or electronic instruments that are 100% under their control to generate all of their sounds. So this isn't out of the box, just sampling and looping and crap. So I really respect that as a top pick. Number two, and this is no surprise, her brother Phineas is becoming an artist in his own right, and my daughter is also really, really engaged with what he is currently working on and releasing. I believe he's on a tour or recently ended a tour. So he's not only the, kind of the production person for Billie Eilish, but her brother is also an artist in his own right and a very solid songwriter, and I think a gifted singer as well. So, and then her final pick was Chappell Roan. She is actually from your neck of the woods, our neck of the woods, Southern Missouri girl. Ended up, in L.A., young talent, also an instrumentalist. She plays keyboards. She actually plays an instrument, composes her own things. She does work with an outside producer who's kind of her go-to, but she is the one writing the music, making the music. Now, I'm making a deal out of that because I think a lot of people assume that things are just being, a lot of pop music, which all three of these artists would be categorized as, is somehow being generated by computers or just, machinery or hit makers or whatever. And these are three artists that are not doing that. They have their own vision. They use the equipment to realize their vision. And I think that's really important. And I'm very grateful to see that my daughter just listening to what's in the ether has gravitated towards those types of artists. So I think that there is, going back to your age old argument of authenticity and AI and all that stuff, I think that it really resonates with me. And I think that it's super cool. And that's kind of the way that I think we should just run these artists down. It's just like, okay, let's just give a little thumbnail and move on. And I'd love to hear what your oldest son picked as his top three.
Yeah, I think first off, I'm really glad to hear what you just described, and because I think we're in a time where there's every style under the sun, and criticizing style in a way is almost unimportant. But the authenticity of how you make it, that's in that formative stage that you described, that's her idea now of how this is done and who can do it and what it takes to do it, is that authentic way of making music. But for my oldest, it's interesting you mentioned about not listening to what dad or whoever listened to, and I've tried to sort of subtly put in some influences, not so much to influence, just as much to put it into their ecosystem, because the ecosystem now is so decentralized compared to when we grew up. And my kids have listened to a lot on YouTube, and that is such a wide net that how can you distill that down into something? But over time, they've found ways to kind of filter that and refine that a bit. But interestingly enough, there's some of that. Something from me has kind of crept in some way. But I would say, anyway, I'm getting off topic. But I would say that the top three artists that he has been listening to for a while now would be the 1975,
Solid
the
choice.
Goo Goo Dolls, and Rush, if you can believe those choices. And it's all connected to other things. But with the 1975, somehow I missed that these guys were like the biggest band of a generation. They were always on the periphery for me, and I never really knew what they were or checked them out or had even an idea who was behind it. But that has kind of come into his radar, and like you were describing, I've listened to it. I've come to appreciate it. It's a real band, really talented songwriters and musicians. It's a very emotional kind of music. There's a lot of emotional truths that's kind of winding its way through it, and I think that speaks to him. And my interpretation is that I think it speaks to him in the place where he is in his life. But again, real band, real music, and very accomplished construction of music with traditional instruments mixed in with that modern production and the modern sounds and so forth. So I've been really impressed and glad that he appreciates those aspects of it. The Goo Goo Dolls, I think that was just a case. Yeah, that was just a case of some songs coming through his radar. So I think it started with some of the obvious ones like Iris and Black Balloon, and he's just dove full on into their discography, and every week he'll pull out a song and share it with me that I've never heard from them, and it's like, wow, that's great. Yeah, they had more really good songs than I realized. Again, very emotional kind of music across their whole discography, but very real, very authentically made. So
a quick fun fact about the Goo Goo Dolls, the guitar player who's the good-looking one, and everybody knows him as the singer. When the band first started, it was all the bass player. The bass player wrote most of the songs. He sang most of the songs. So it was really interesting that their commercial, in their commercial heyday, the bass player kind of like floated back to the background a little bit. But I think in more recent releases, they've gone back to being more equals, as in splitting their albums and output 50-50. And that's just a fun fact about the Goo Goo Dolls that maybe some.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting thing. And he has a decided preference for the guitarist's songs and so forth. I think he doesn't care as much for the rougher, kind of more ragtag edge of the other one. That hasn't really become his favorite style yet. He goes more for the emotional side of things. But
cool.
So it's been cool to reappreciate things that flew under my radar originally, and then There could be a variety of things that would be number three, but Rush has just percolated over time, and that sounds like the ultimate case of dad forcing music on him. But actually, he really kind of picked that up on his own. I haven't been pushing that on him so much. He's heard a lot more of things like Jethro Tull and other bands, directly from me, like playing in the car or whatever.
Yeah.
But that one was I don't know. I think I don't know if I could even take credit for that. But when they were much younger and they had little portable music players, digital music players, and I made sort of a dad mixtape of random songs for him that had everything from like I don't know. Van Halen to Flock of Seagulls to Men Without Hats, and then there was I think one Rush song. I think it was what's the Time Stand Still. Very random Rush song. I wasn't going to throw him into the deep end. Maybe I should have, but
why didn't you put Tom Sawyer on there? Jeez.
I might have put that on there as well. So maybe that has something to do with it. But it was more a case of trying to meet him where he was in kind of a lighter, poppier state of things. And but then over time, he'd hear little bits and pieces from me. But then he started mentioning to me songs that he liked, it's mostly the post Permanent Waves kind of stuff, but gradually kind of filtering his way back. He told me he really liked Manhattan Project because it related to something he was learning about in history class at that time. And he'll mention other songs. They'll come up in his playlists when he's streaming through the car, or he'll recognize the songs that I play. And so, that feels like parenting success right there.
That's very, very
if you
cool.
If you can get your son to appreciate Russ, and he likes that his teachers get references to it as well. So it's kind of come full circle where the kids like us who were in school listening to Rush are now the teachers in class who get the references when they share it. So don't want to go on too long about that. I could say a lot about the process of his developing listening to music over time, but those are the three I think that I would highlight.
That's pretty cool. I mean, you're in the Midwest. I mean, Rush. I mean, it's going to be there. All right. Now on to my 10-year-old son. His top pick by far would be AJR. It's three brothers, and they have been around for quite a while. They've been around, I think, actually releasing music for over a decade now. He's going to go see his first big show here coming up in a couple weeks, and he's very, very excited. What I like about AJR is that, once again, they record exclusively in their own recording environment. They call it the living room studio. So they record at home. And they're multi-instrumentalists. They have had a lot of success. I love their songs because, and I think that why my son likes them so much, the lyrics are witty. They're satirical, sarcastic, but very incisive. Some people would say, "Oh, it's kind of like novelty music," but it's not. It's real stuff, and they have a very nice emotional undercurrent to everything they do, and it's 100% authentic. Once again, these are people who are making music with their instruments on their own, doing their own production work, and they found great success doing that. So AJR is one that I think that everybody should just give that music a chance. It's really interesting, and it's cool to see that they kind of DIY, hand-stitched it, and then became a national act of quite a bit of success. His second pick is Imagine Dragons. When he was really young, kind of the same thing, but he developed his own playlist. Like, he was like, oh, I like AJR, so let's find artists that are similar. And Imagine Dragons was one of those that kind of hung on, and then he's listened to more and more. And the way he described it to me is that he really likes them because he likes their sense of melody. My son is a very gifted pianist, and he's classically trained and plays jazz as well, and he's quite accomplished. And he can identify these things. So he hears things in Imagine Dragons music that is compelling to him, just from a musical standpoint. He doesn't dive into the lyrics the same way with them that he does with AJR. But he really, really enjoys them. And then here's my proud moment thing. We did that video a year ago about the Kinks versus the Beatles kind of thing, which is still out there, growing every day on YouTube, and I hope it continues to. And the Kinks are his. He inspired me to make that video because he just kept diving deeper and deeper into the Kinks, and he's just like, they're so good. And I think at one point he made some like offhand. He's like, who are the other bands around when the Kinks were around? I know they're really old. And I said, well, the Beatles would have been their main competition. He says, oh, the Kinks are way better than the Beatles. And that's where that whole video. That's the origin point of that video. I've been wanting to write that in a comment at some point, and it never felt right. So I'm saying it in this video to be like, my son was the inspiration for that video. It didn't just come out of nowhere. I didn't want to just be like, the Beatles suck or something like that. But I'm saying that from a young person's perspective today, with no context, the Kinks resonate more with him than the Beatles. There's something real there. It's not just Summer of Love or, a bunch of platitudes. It's like he feels the authenticity of those, the storytelling in the Kinks, because there's a lot of great storytelling there. So that's mine. The Kinks are my version of your Rush. So anyway.
And that's a really good one. And it's almost like he's come from an alternate reality where all the kids went crazy for the Kinks and didn't have time for the Beatles, and how different the world would be if that had been the case. But again, I love that authenticity. And one thing I really love what you mentioned was, which I think is a parallel with my younger son, is a way of listening and a way of hearing, and hearing things in the music and making connections and being tuned into melody. So for my younger son, he's still in that sort of, I think, wide net phase where he went through a long period of kind of hand-me-down influences from his brother and some of the YouTube playlists that his brother would put together of a mishmash of lo-fi, hip-hop, almost atmospheric type of music, things related to cartoons and video games and so forth. And but something we've really noticed about him is that he really has a good sense of melody as well. He can pick up a melody out of a song, whether it's the lead melody or a harmony or something else. He'll just reach in and grab it and imitate it, and he's pitch perfect. He's dead on with his pitch every time, and he can mimic that. And so he's really tuned in to certain aspects of music. And I think he just finished his first year band class playing the trumpet and French horn, and I think that is just refining that. And so he seems to have a real interest in sort of just processing music and sort of filtering it and looking for things in it that resonates. And he finds that in a lot of different kinds of music. So it's not so much with him a case of a top three as much as developing a way of hearing and being able to appreciate and enjoy a lot of things that are almost aspects of music. He'll love the rhythm, the beat in a certain song. He'll pick up on the melody of another song and carry that around for a while. And so he's really in a sort of music appreciation stage, which I think is just preceding that I've got my thing, and this is my favorite. But he's so tuned in and perceptive and aware of things. It reminds me of how my early development of listening to music was tuning into things like that and finding those little things that excited me more than an overall genre or a style or whatnot. One thing that was interesting is after hearing my song 40 Trees that I'd played a few times in the lead up to releasing it, a couple weeks ago, I was playing a random mix, like a random Spotify generated mix in the car, and a song by Wire Train came on, and he was listening to it. It was a song I'd never heard before. He was listening to it, and he said, "Dad, that sounds like you." Because it was that sort of the way you described it, like that West Coast, sort of early '80s to mid '80s sort of sound. That combination of the melody and the melodic arpeggios and and just the sort of gentle rhythmic feel that you had made the connection to
Yeah.
when talking about my song. He made it on his own, about music that I've never listened to myself even, and certainly that he had never heard before. So it was like I can see these threads coming together of real music appreciation
He's making
for him.
connections.
Yeah, so that's my statement for him. It's just that he's really
Cool.
evolving into a an intentional listener and appreciator, which I can't ask for anything more than that. And that seems to be one of the threads of everything we're talking about.
Sure, and I'm glad that you didn't like try to shoehorn something in that wasn't authentic, or if that's where he's at, that's where he's at, and that's wonderful, and that's great that he's making those connections. So I just wanted to make this episode because I thought it would be interesting to think about, where younger people are. Because I know what the demographic is that watches this channel. It's everything from 14-year-olds up to, octogenarians. And the thing is that I think but the bulk of our viewership is somewhere in that like 20 to, 60 range. And I thought it would be interesting to think about what like younger people who are like forming their ears right now and what they're really into. And you know what? I was heartened by this entire discussion. I was heartened by bringing this topic up. I was heartened when I spoke to my children, and it's great to hear what you're saying, and that music still resonates, and music is real, and music is made by people. Even no matter what tools they are using, good music that resonates, is going to be made by people. And we have to remember that before we all start going, oh, the sky is falling and everything's going to be shit. It's not going to be. I think that I have hope in the kids. So
yeah, the kids are all right.
The kids are all right. Thank you so much for watching the video to this point. If you've made it to this point, please hit the subscribe button. Greatly appreciated. Leave something in the comments. Do you have children in your household that are big music fans? What are they listening to? Leave it in the comments. You take care. Hit subscribe, and we'll see you next time.